Okay. And before I forget, in case some of you guys are wondering and may have already noticed, the way the online My Laker link, the grade book might not actually reflect the grade that you have or should have. Don't worry about that. I am actually, I don't know if you can see that. Okay. Um, I actually am tracking this myself manually, so don't worry. It's on here. The discussion boards are like really wonky the way that they upload, and if I open a open discussion board and then I open an assignment and try to link the two, sometimes they don't talk to each other, and some of you guys are still getting credit for week 4 even though you're responding to weeks 5 and 6, and it's trying to apply it multiple, it's doing weird wonky things. So again, don't worry about it. It might look weird right now. We're blessed. We got this. There is a little option that I can choose the extra credit. Say you're supposed to have like 97 out of 100 points and you only have 80 something. Again, I'll have it on paper and I can just make up that difference via extra credit. Just arbitrary. There you go. Whatever the amount is to get you up to that point that you're supposed to be at. So if your grade doesn't look right online, it'll all work out in the end. I wanted to look at a guy named Paulo Freire. Fieri, however you want to say it. Doesn't matter. Anyways, in his book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, he talks about this thing called this false generosity, and that it addresses the symptom and not the problem, like donating to food shelters. Yeah, that alleviates temporary hunger, but that's not the root of the problem. There's still people that are going to be going hungry and returning to that food shelter. So why don't we tackle this from a systemic standpoint, starting from the bottom? How does hunger occur? And in a lot of cases, it would point towards vast inequalities in society, such as distribution of wealth, poor social programs, et cetera, qualifications for these social programs. True generosity is fighting to destroy the problem at its origin. This false generosity maintains oppression and equality in society, while true generosity attempts to create the conditions for liberation to free them from this oppression. An example of this might be with Bill Gates and how he donates to the malaria relief programs instead of attempting to address unjust distribution of healthcare access in developing countries with corrupt governments. He uses this false generosity as an opportunity for him to basically look like a good guy in the public eye. He looks to only eliminate the experience instead of the poverty that is at the root of the problem. A real good guy would go about trying to take care of the problem at its core, at its root, rather than just alleviating it temporarily. Next, Paulo Freire talks about this notion of narration sickness, and that is the teacher is the narrator, and that they tell these stories and retell these same stories, and nothing changes. It just replicates the status quo. People are manageable and are adaptable beings. Students are the passive recipients of this knowledge, and the teacher is the active depositor. So basically, students, they're like sponges. They're these little things that you, like, if you go to a bank, you make a bank deposit, and you come back later and take out that deposit for X amount of money, whatever the case might be. Same thing. Instead of money in a bank deposit, we're talking about children and knowledge being deposited into their little brains, and then that knowledge is then later asked to be withdrawn in the time of taking a test or something like that. It's said that students can't create their own knowledge, they just store it. The teacher is an active agent who is in control, who makes all the decisions, who makes all the actions, basically. Students just sit there passively and absorb knowledge while the teacher lectures. Kind of like what I'm doing right now. What am I achieving? Why am I here? Am I just a puppet in this game of life?
Where are you going?
Just leaving.
But where?
I have to return some videotapes.
Basically, the student's job is just to sit there, be a zombie, and absorb information. Be meek, be passive, absorb information. There's no opportunity or encouragement for any sort of independent thought, no critical thinking. Throughout K through 12 education, everything you're taught is presented as fact. It's the end of story. Just retain this information, don't ask questions, and regurgitate it at the time in which we request you to. Memorize facts and reproduce those facts. Basically, teaching students to obey. Sit passively, do as you're told, follow order, structure, rules, laws, guidelines, that the teacher is the figure of authority. This maintains this power relationship between student or pupil and the master, the person in position of authority. From high school to college, from college into the workforce, and there on out through your life, you are taught to be a subordinate, basically, to obey authority and don't question it. This essentially is this perpetuating cycle of oppression, hence the title of the book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Are we able to free ourselves from this cycle of oppression, basically? And Paulo Freire believes so, and that is through co-learning. Students ask questions, and the class and the teacher learn and arrive at solutions and answers together. To this effect, it sounds to me like there might actually be a better way. We might actually be able to break this cycle. Next, we're going to look at a thing called critical pedagogy. So there are two goals in critical pedagogy, and that is to locate the causes. What are the social economic factors keeping people oppressed, keeping people down, and the transformation at the subjective, individual, and objective level. Why do we even care? Well, we care because it's dehumanizing. To be fully human, we must be fully in control over what we do, how we think, and what we want to become in life, or at least according to Paulo Freire. So when you stop and think about it, kind of in effect, what I'm doing right now, I'm oppressing you. I mean, right now you're not interacting with me. This is a one-way transaction where I'm presenting information, you're sitting in front of a computer screen listening to me, and you have little to no input on what you're about to view, hear, and see in the next couple seconds. I'm just spewing information and you're absorbing it. There's no discussion, no dialogue, just you sitting there accepting my words as fact, or maybe you are, maybe you're not. Good of you not to. It's ironic to think because this is very undemocratic. America prides itself in being so democratic. However, our age-old standard of teaching people is super undemocratic. You have no voice. You have no discussion, no expressing your thoughts or interest. It's about freedom to dissent, opposition, defy, disobey, reject the dominant ideas and beliefs. Isn't that what America was founded on? Basically giving the middle finger to Britain going, nah, we're not going to do what you say. We're going to start our own new country. This banking model of education doesn't teach us this. So what is the solution then? Paulo Freire also posits this notion of problem posing. So instead, the instructor asks questions, the student asks questions, and they are directed at their problem in their social context. So that means basically collectively working as a team to identify through a course of questioning what is the root of the problem. So a formal education, aka book learning, is the learning of academic facts and concepts through formal curriculum, whereas, as you might imagine, informal education is the cultural norms, values, and expected behaviors by participating in society. So basically, this is kind of what the streets teach you, or the passing of classes, or out on the playground, these sort of things. These life lessons that, again, a book can't teach you. So I bought a Chevy truck the other day, and weird things have been happening ever since.
How in the hell did I get here? Well, it don't matter. Me and my grade 8 education and my vast world knowledge of never having left my hometown, I'm going to tell you everything there is to know about life. First of all, you can't be gone loving anyone else until you learn to love your own gosh darn self. My mama always told me pineapple don't belong on pizza. No fancy tropical fruit belongs anywhere on fine Italian cuisine. I mean, that's a spaghetti pie. That's sacred. Bring back hee-haw. Make NASCAR all year long. And I don't know. I guess that's it.
And so there's two different types of functions. There's manifest functions, which are openly stated functions with intended goals. So this is including socialization, the transmission of culture, social control, like be on time, wait in line, raise your hand before you speak, where's your hall pass, these sort of things. Social placement, we learn hierarchy, we know the certain in-groups and out-groups. So the jocks, we had the preps, the goths, the nerds, etc., etc. Basically these different social groups that you knew your place. Either you're like that weird geeky band kid that hung out with all your friends wearing Converse, or you're the jockey, Nike wearing athletic dude and the rest of the football team, or whatever the case might be. The second type of function is latent function. That is hidden, unstated functions and sometimes unintended consequences. As you might remember, courtship, getting your first crush on someone, social networking, being able to work within a group, and political and social integration. And so from a conflict perspective, public schools perpetuate the inequality in social class. So if you think about it, again, how are schools funded? And that is via tax dollars. Well, if you happen to live in a really high class, upper middle class neighborhood, your folks and your neighbors generate more income than, say, the ghetto side of town. And so as a result, your school is going to be better funded. You're going to get a better science lab. Every one of you guys are going to get the best MacBooks or, the best Apple tablet things, right? So you guys are going to have high tech stuff. You're not expecting to see anyone having to share a book or anything like that. You guys are all getting brand new, fresh books with no notes in them, things like that. So you're going to be getting a top-notch education system. Well, as a result, you're going to graduate with better grades. You're going to place better and, proceed further into like a better college, things like that. And as a result, you're going to go off, become a college graduate, get a better placing career, and you're going to have kids that then you're going to grow up in some suburban neighborhood that, again, this perpetuating cycle that your kids are going to go to a really top-notch public school, graduate top in their class, go to this prestigious college, and perpetuate this cycle. Whereas if you look on the other side of this story is where, say, kids growing up in like the ghetto or less affluent, poverty level, working class neighborhood, you're going to be going to basically like a ghetto rundown public school. Kids are going to be having to share textbooks. There's notes scribbled all inside of them, not to mention the mental and psychological impact of, having to work with hand-me-downs. What does that say about the student is, I'm not worth a new textbook. I've got to use this used crap. And so as a result, poor test scores, low placement, high dropout rate. Not a lot of these kids are going off to school. Instead, they're dropping out working on, in the mill or logging or fishing. Nothing against these careers. They're pretty well paying, but not as many of these kids are going off to college and things like that. They might be first generation. And so what's going to end up happening? They're going to have kids that end up probably going back to the same, schools that they did. And as a result, it's this perpetuating cycle of, working class society kind of creating the same future for their children and their children. And one of them I had the chance of, interacting with was what's called a Montessori school. They're kind of interesting. So at Montessori schools, they take a different approach to things. So they've got mixed age groups. Typically, if you've got first graders, they're, whatever age they are, 5 and 6, and second graders are 6 and 7. They don't believe in that at Montessori schools. Is they encourage these broader age groups. So you've got 3-year-olds in the same classes on up to like 6, 7, and 8-year-olds. And so it's already giving you a real world perspective. Like if you think of your workplace, if you're working at, McDonald's or Dairy Queen, whatever, you might have to be working with, pudwhacking kids with their first job being 16 years old, clear on up to people in their 50s working at the front counter at the register. So already at an early age, we're instilling this concept of multi-age groups interacting with each other in a work environment, that be the playground or rec lab, whatever it might be. Children are able to choose their own activities and their own assignments for themselves. They also do strange things where there are these uninterrupted blocks of class time where they're able to work on a project uninterrupted, sometimes upwards of 3+ hours. So if you think back to your middle school, high school days, end of class, if you only made it halfway through the chapter, you slammed a bookmark in it and pring goes the bell and off you are to the next class, whatever it might be. There's also this discovery model. So when they assign an assignment, there's no instructions to them. So it's this process of discovery of how things work or how they're to solve these things on their own, instilling this sense of independence and accomplishment. And lastly, specialized teachers who identify students' characteristics, innate talents, and abilities. So I remember this because I was helping with a math class at the time, and one of the kids was like in love with Titanic, and we helped adapt his lesson plan around the Titanic. And so we were like learning about circumference of a circle and things like that, and like the surface area of, in this case, we made it the main upper deck where people would walk about the upper part of the boat and look over the railing and things like that. And so we made a surface area math equation for him that was tailored to his fascination with the Titanic. And when we were doing like radius and circumference, we were looking at the smokestacks on the Titanic and like the size of the little windows on the side of it. Tailored his fascination with the Titanic with his math assignments, played to his abilities and his interests. And as you can imagine, the kid just smashed his final exam, just 100 out of 100. It's just a different approach that we take to teaching little people.
With that, class dismissed.
Boneless pizza.
Now that's a lot of damage!